currently in the process of looking for a therapist for myself. And so I thought, what better time than now to make a video about what questions you can ask a therapist that you're thinking about working with. Now, these questions are pretty subjective. Obviously, there's a lot of my own value system in these questions, but I'll sort of go through them, talk about my reasoning with each one, as well as how I would respond to all of these questions. And there's a lot. I've got 17 here, which you won't be able to ask all of these questions in a consultation call, which is typically 15 to 20 minutes. But some of these things you can find out just by looking at someone's online profiles or their website. Also, you can sort of get a feel for some based on how they respond to some of the other ones. And also you can choose which of these are most important to you when you're asking. Okay, so that said, let's get into it. First question. Are they creative? I think this is an important question to ask just because it helps to have a creative perspective to approach whatever situations, whatever problems you're dealing with. It helps to have some sort of creative outlet in their life. Something which is not a great question to ask because it's a little bit intrusive and beyond what you could reasonably expect someone to share is are you doing your own healing work? People are really not going to be open about that, I think, in a 15 to 20 minute consultation call. But what you can ask is, are you creative? And I think creativity is a core part of being in a healing journey. So that can tell you a lot. Are they creative? And what did they do for creativity? It also tells you, do you have something outside of work that you like? Some form of creative expression. Okay. So, question number 2. Are they radical? I tend to think a lot of, normative or mainstream approaches, both to mental health as well as to other things, a lot of the time do more harm than good. There's a reason that, powerful systems have norms, and there's a reason that people are pushing against them. And when I say radical, by the way, I mean radical meaning left-wing or progressive, not radical to the right. I would strongly doubt a right-wing radical would make for a good therapist. I'm sure that there are exceptions. Actually, I don't think that's very likely. I'll believe it when I see it. Put it like that. I'll believe it when I see it. You want a left-wing radical because they are going to be, it shows you that they're introspective about the problems of our society and that they have opinions about how things can improve. And also maybe that they have some hope for how things can improve. This is all going to be important because if you have someone who's very normative, if you bring them issues, they may try to get you to just fit in and to just deal with whatever you're being faced with, rather than to say no, actually, that you're right, there is a problem here and it's not you. So some amount of radicalness is important. Question number 3. What COVID precautions are they taking currently? So this is more for our current time. But yeah, I think, I would have a difficult time trusting someone who is not taking COVID precautions or is very haphazard or just doing whatever they want. Or they wouldn't say that. Maybe what they would say is what someone would say is, oh, I've got the vaccine. That should be enough. If they think the vaccine is enough, they're maybe not thinking about like the consequences of like what can happen, and like what are the outcomes of what can happen, which would be like good information for you to know in terms of like their thinking about how what they say or do might impact you, or just how you might be impacting in your life, or like other people are impacting you, to have like a sense of like more than just their own actions, but like how are those actions within a broader context. Also, I think like it gives you the chance to check for ableism, which can be helpful. I am taking a fair number of COVID precautions. Also, I didn't say how I'd answer the other two. Yes, I'm radical. Yes, I'm creative. Next. Number 4, how would they deal with a challenge? So meaning if you are in a session with them and you maybe challenge something that they're saying, like something that they did that you don't like, or that they have an inaccurate perception of something you're saying, how would they react to that? And so what you'd be looking for, and what I would say is, oh, I would be open to that. I would want to learn from what you're telling me. I would want to take that in and, really try to see things from your perspective. Something that would not be okay is anything dismissive, like any sort of dismissive response to this question of like, oh, I never have this problem. Or like, oh, well, we tend to look at how this is reflective of your issues. It's like, well, maybe this is part of your like stuff too. So, and I think generally like anything dismissive is a concern. Anything where it's like openness and trying to learn and curiosity is like a good thing. Next question. Which question am I on? Number 5. How do they approach treatment planning? Treatment planning, I don't use this word. I use the word intention setting. But yeah, basically treatment planning is like, how do they conceptualize like how we come to an agreement about the work we're doing together? Because in some situations, in some settings with some people, it can be pretty standard for them to do an assessment, meaning like you tell them a bunch of stuff, and then they go back and they make a plan without your input. That would be that would be questionable how supportive they can be if they're making a plan without your input. So something you would be looking for is one, that they've put some thought into it, because if they're just saying, oh, we just see what you need and then we just, whatever, should be a little more like intentionality than that, but like intentionality plus openness, like openness to collaboration, like collaboration in terms of like, this is what we're doing, that we're deciding together, and intentionality about like, this is how I set that collaboration up. And if they're like, oh yeah, if they give you like an answer that's like, there's no intention, or if there's an answer of like, we don't collaborate, both of these would be like not a good fit. I am very intentional about collaboration. So question 6, how do they approach self-disclosure? Self-disclosure is another one of those like therapy terms. What it means is basically like them sharing about themselves. And this can be really useful in a lot of contexts, in the sense of like, just like there not being this like barrier of like only one person is sharing all of the stuff and the other person's like sort of like sitting like judging without them like being a person too and like sharing about their own experiences. So it can be important to share. And like that said, they shouldn't be sharing everything. Like they shouldn't be gossiping with you about like, their partner or what they did that weekend. A little bit of like what I did this weekend is okay, but people saying that. But I think really what you would be looking for, and like the way I approach this is I share things that I have processed. So things that I have processed which are relevant to whatever you're bringing up, with your permission, I'll share. And what else? Yeah, with like the goal of like my sharing is supporting you. I am not sharing to get validation from you. Because there's two approaches that therapists do sometimes, which are both not helpful, which are like two sides of the same coin. One is to never share anything at all and to say like, sort of gives a perception of like, oh, I'm better than you. You don't really want that. Or the other one is to like just constantly be sharing everything and for there to be like no filter, which means that like they maybe haven't like done their own work and are not going to be able to support you very well. So yeah, basically, again, you would just want to see some intentionality with this. Like you would just want to see like them to say like, oh, I share where it would be helpful for you, something like that. Or like I share like when it's relevant to the situation you're talking about. But yeah, I think like over or under sharing are both can be harmful, and so there's a balance to be found. Next question, number 7, is how much money do they charge and why? Again, I think here there's a balance to be found, because if they're charging too much, like if they're charging $200-300+ a session, it really shows that they like maybe are in this for the money and they're not like in this to support you. And if they're charging like very small amounts of money, maybe it shows that they don't have a lot of care for their own self and are maybe working too much in order to compensate for charging very little. I think like your therapist is a person too, like they have their own financial needs, and so the fee, it really should be around like finding that balance of like respecting themselves and also respecting you, wanting to support you. Something I've seen a lot of people do is they have like sliding scales of like, if you are this comfortable, charge maybe this much or within this range. If you're maybe like less comfortable or like this amount of comfort, charging less. Also, some people will accept insurance as a way to provide affordable care. There's different. I think like there's different like ways of providing therapy in an affordable way, and you want to see like some intentionality about like them providing therapy in an affordable way, one way or another, and also that they're also making a decent amount of income. So question 8, this is connected to the previous one, but it's how many clients do you see in a given week? Keeping in mind again, like too many, they won't have the emotional space to be super supportive of you. They're maybe going to be overworked, and this is something you mostly see at large agencies. Agencies that tend to work a lot with like just like Medicare, Medicaid people, that they tend to like load up as many, and this is not their fault, not always their fault, because a lot of the time their superiors are telling them like this is your minimum. It's like 40 or 50 hours a week, or like, which is a lot for I think like a good, this is my perspective, I think a good like full-time like number of people for a therapist to be working with is somewhere around like 20 to 30 per week. You start getting like much higher than that, and I know like some people schedule like half-hour sessions in order to see like more, or like it's just like 40, 50, 60 people a week. Like it's hard to support people if there's so many people. It's like, I think a similar analogy I'll say is like, classroom sizes for teachers. Like we know that like teachers shouldn't, like there's like a good ratio of like 1 to like 10 or less, and yet oftentimes it's like 3, 4, 5 times that, that's not going to be good, like for those students. So, or the teacher. So yeah, you like want to see some amount of like, again, like care for themselves. That's like allowing them to care for you. My answer to this one currently is like, I would say I'm like trying to land there. I'm not quite there yet since I started fairly recently in my practice, but that's where I'm like hoping to sit, is in that range. Next question 9 is, what is their opinion on referring people to psychiatric drugs? Something you would be looking for here, something I would be looking for, is like basically that like the ball is in your court. They're going to respect your decision making, your autonomy with regards to if you want to take that option. And something to be wary of is people who say, oh, these are so helpful, I give them to everybody. Because my perspective, my opinion is, in order to be in a healing journey, it helps to be feeling your emotions and your body, which psychiatric drugs will numb, which can be helpful in certain circumstances and certain situations in your life. But if they're like, that choice is up to you, that's fine. If they're saying, yeah, this is best practices for everybody, that means that they're more interested in you being numb than in you healing. So I would be interested in really just a perspective that focuses on autonomy and shared decision making, which are like core for me. Next, number 10, and this is very related to the previous one, how do they conceptualize diagnosis, or like what is the role of diagnosis? And again, I would be looking for like them respecting your choice. Like, is this a framework that you find valuable? Is this something that you find meaning in? And less of like, this is how I think about everything, I give everyone a diagnosis, it would be strange for me to not diagnoses are not fully explanatory in the way that they can explain everything in your life and what has happened to you. What they describe are like a set of symptoms. Like if you look through the DSM, what you will see is a way of categorizing symptoms. And if you're trying to get to the root of like what your experiences are and why you're having those symptoms, maybe you can find this classification helpful, but you also don't need to. So I know that there's like a fair number of therapists who it's their belief that everyone should have a diagnosis and like this is what people need in their own healing journey. I'm very questioning of that mindset. Again, it's something I would say like that should be your decision. If you find meaning in it, if you find community in other people who have this diagnosis, if it explains things that like maybe other frameworks don't explain for you, that's okay. But again, I would say it's not everything. It can't explain everything. Reason being is because it's my belief that mental illness or mental health stuff is not fundamentally biological in nature. It's really a result of what has happened to you and what are the broader systems that are having impacts on your life. I will get more into that in future videos. Question number 11. How do they conceptualize trauma? So this is really like almost like a continuation of the previous question, because I view trauma as being the roots of these symptoms that give us diagnosis. Basically what you would be looking for is that, different people have different experiences, and like it's more about like what happens after the experience or the environment you're in when the experience is happening than the specific experience. people can have the same, on the surface, what seems like the same experience, but have very different outcomes, very different experiences of that like situation. So really you'd be looking at them to say like, yeah, people have different experiences. And like, again, like they trust for you to say what is or is not trauma. Okay. Question 12 is, how do they work with someone who is suicidal? I know suicide sometimes can feel taboo to talk about in our system. But I'll share with you why I think this is important. And again, it has to do with like autonomy and like, are they able to trust you? So a lot of people, a lot of therapists may be trigger happy and say like, I'm gonna just report you, we're gonna get that taken care of. And it comes from like, they don't want to be liable if something were to happen to you. Or maybe like they're afraid because they care about you that they don't want something to happen to you. Both of these make sense from a decision-making perspective. However, I think that these forms of treatment can be coercive and often harmful. And so I would be looking for someone who is to say like, hey, like if you're expressing these things, we're going to talk about it. And maybe we will be able to change what we're doing so you feel more supported. And so to be able to talk about like, hey, this is what we're doing right now. How can I support you more? That's what I would be looking for. Because feeling suicidal is not like destiny. It's an expression of like a need for more support. And the way our mental health system handles suicide, and again, this is something I'll be talking more about in a future video, the way our mental health system handles suicide often exacerbates what is leading people to feel that way, by taking their power away, by locking them up, by forcing them to take drugs that maybe they don't understand or don't want to take, forcing people to be in group therapy with people they don't know. There's no way to consent to this treatment, and so it can't be helpful. So really like looking at like, how can I support you in this relationship? And then like also like if you're consenting to like wanting to be hospitalized because that's something you're choosing, that's your choice and that's okay too. Next question, 13. How do they conceptualize systemic oppression? Basically, with this one, you would just be looking for an understanding of like what the system part of systemic oppression means, meaning that it's not the actions or beliefs of individual people, even if there's a lot of those people. It's more about that there is a system that people are responding to, that there's like an ideology that people tend to have these beliefs, and then the systems like reinforce and perpetuate this ideology, and that certain people are systemically harmed, and that there's like it's not a moral thing, it is a systemic thing, and that a system behaves in a particular way. It's like water freezes. Here's an example. Water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius, or I think -32 Fahrenheit. That is systemically how water operates on this planet, right? So like similarly, systemic oppression just has these rules for how it operates. And I'll refer to my video about white supremacy somewhere, because I get into more about how that works as a system. Okay, question 14 is, what is their stance on forgiving oppressors or people who have done us harm, or also specifically parents? Because a lot of the time, that's like one example of people saying, to forgive and forget, which often can be harmful. But I think also generally people who have caused harm, are they going to leave? Are they going to leave that decision up to you? Again, are they going to respect your autonomy? Is it going to be your process that they're respecting, or is it more so that they have a belief that everyone should forgive people in this role, or like this role is good, and so you need to figure out a way to deal with it? But of honoring the pain and the experiences you've had, and of allowing you to just make your own decisions about how to approach that. And yeah, I think like my response is like, there's a big difference between forgiveness and acceptance, which a lot of people have some confusion about that. Acceptance is saying, okay, this person is the way that they are because of these horrible experiences they've had, these other systems of oppression which are affecting them, and that contributed to how they treated me. But you're not necessarily forgiving them for that. You're accepting these are the reasons. And for me, forgiveness needs to come with or after accountability, meaning people like owning up to their decisions and taking steps to make sure it doesn't happen again. And then also for the people who they've impacted, for them still to decide how do they want to deal with them, and then how do they want to be in relationship with the person who's done them harm, and then that person respecting that decision. So for me, forgiveness comes after accountability. And so something I think to strive for with people who've done us harm is acceptance of what's happened, of how they might have been led to do this, rather than focusing on, you've got to forgive. I don't think you do. Okay, question 15. What theories are they grounded in? Again, this is something I maybe would like to talk about more in like multiple future videos about my thoughts on different theories. But yeah, I think some general thoughts on some theories. From my perspective, behavioral theories do not get to the root of like what you're experiencing or what your experiences are and sort of like what to do about those things. Behavioral theories tend to focus on adjusting behaviors. So I would be sort of cautious around behavioral theories. Somatic or mindfulness or body-focused types of theories I think can be really helpful, but I think need to be paired with a sort of processing sort of experience, because what can happen is like we can ground our bodies and then like not know why we're not getting grounded again, and so it keeps us in this loop of like needing to ground our bodies and like not understanding like why we're feeling this way. So I think the why is very important. So so some types of theories that I like, theories that I would attest to, theories that I would be interested in are, I practice narrative theory, or like my own version of it. I think also something like internal family systems is a pretty good one. And it's like also not perfect, like none of these are perfect, but I think that helps provide some perspective in digging deeper. Arts therapy can be a good one. Also like psychodynamic can be good. But also it like really heavily depends on like how do they integrate multiple different types of theories, how do they approach using these different theories. Keep it in mind along with everything else. Okay. Question 16. Who have they learned from? So none of us are an island. None of us are separate from other people. So if you're working with someone, who have they learned from? And then to go and see whether this is someone who's written a book or people who've done talks, or if it's like a professor or someone in their life, who have they learned from and what have they learned from them, I think can give you some good insight into like what they value and what is important to them. And maybe you then can also look up like, what was this other person saying? Maybe that's not possible depending on who it is, but maybe you can look that up and say like, I really like what this person is saying, and so I think I would be able to trust someone who's learned from this person. Or maybe you listen to them and say, I don't know about this, and then that will tell you a lot about someone who's learned from that person. So it's a good question to ask. Question 17, my final question, is what critiques do they have of the mental health system? I have a bunch. I'll be getting into that throughout this channel. I think basically what I'd be looking for is just like anything. Like, show me that you're thinking critically about the system that you're in. Show me that like you are able to see things that are not going okay, and that you are able to like call attention to that. There's probably some that I would like to hear more than others, like people saying like non-consensual treatment is a good one, and that can show up in many different types of ways. If they were to say something like, oh, we're not getting paid enough, I think, yes, that's correct. Insurance companies have not given therapists a raise in years, and also are paid a lot less than other people with similar amounts of schooling. That's an issue. But like as a client, it doesn't tell me a lot about like how like your critical perspective would impact our work together. But it's still good to hear if people have any sort of critiques of the mental health system, because it's really not perfect. It really has a lot of issues, and so for people to be able to at least acknowledge some of those issues. I think if I was asked this question, I would sort of use what we had been talking about to determine like some common ground, because I have a lot of critiques. So to like find one that this person might be able to relate to. Okay, so these have been my 17 questions to ask a potential therapist or to look for in their materials online. Hope it's been helpful. Also, please feel free to like call me, and if you live in the state where I practice therapy, to call me and to ask these questions. I think these are good questions to ask, just to see like a little more like behind the curtain of like what they're actually thinking and what is actually going on, and also for me sharing some of my values via these questions with you. I hope they have been thought-provoking and helpful. If you like what I'm doing, please subscribe to the channel. I will be digging deeper into a lot of these questions that I posed and why I've posed them. So yeah, subscribe to the channel, and if you want to support me so I can make more videos, there's a Patreon link in the video description. So yeah, stick around, we'll be talking lots more.